Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What happens when a television host known for sharp comebacks and cutting remarks meets a Southern senator who speaks slowly, deliberately, and with a calm confidence rooted in knowing exactly who he is and what he stands for? When someone who treats volume as proof of correctness encounters someone who understands that the quietest voice in the room can hold the most influence. When a host who is used to steering every conversation through interruption and aggression faces a guest who refuses to be rushed, refuses to be rattled, and refuses to follow rules designed to make him look foolish, what you're about to see isn't just another tense political interview. It isn't just another talk show confrontation or another moment where a host and guests disagree on live television. This is the moment Senator John Kennedy, a man whose Southern drawl hides one of Washington's sharpest minds, whose folksy manner masks quick wit, and whose unhurried speech leads people to underestimate him until he dismantles their entire argument, reminded everyone that real power doesn't require volume. Real confidence doesn't require aggression, and that sometimes the most effective response to mockery is simply refusing to be mocked. The View invited Senator Kennedy, expecting what they usually get from political guests, either defensiveness under aggressive questioning or angry reactions that produce viral clips. Joy Behar clearly entered the interview with a plan: mock his intelligence, dismiss his folksy style as an act, and present his deliberate words as proof that he hides a lack of substance behind Southern charm. What Joy called tough questioning, Kennedy would soon reveal as an attempt to perform superiority without earning it, attacking someone's communication style because you cannot effectively challenge their ideas, treating deliberate speech as a sign of slow thinking instead of recognizing it as the mark of someone who chooses words carefully because words matter. These were the missteps Joy made. What she and others who equate quick comebacks with intelligence misunderstood was that Kennedy's slow, measured delivery wasn't a limitation. It was a strategy. Every pause was intentional. Every word was chosen. Every line was crafted to land with maximum impact precisely because it came from thought rather than reflex. This isn't about whether politicians should face tough questions or whether public figures should defend their positions. It is about the difference between legitimate scrutiny and performative mockery, between challenging someone's views and simply trying to make them look foolish, between journalism seeking understanding and entertainment seeking to diminish. Joy Behar believed she was being clever, setting up a politician she had decided to treat as a punchline, preparing jokes meant to get laughs at his expense, and approaching the interview as a chance to showcase superiority over someone she assumed would be an easy target. In reality, she showed that some people confuse fast talking with clear thinking, that mockery isn't insight, and that the person you treat as a joke may be several steps ahead of you. And when Senator Kennedy, who has faced prosecutors, debated Supreme Court judges, and navigated Washington for years, decided to show Joy what happens when you mistake a crafted persona for an actual weakness. The result wasn't just a political interview. It was a demonstration of how real intelligence works, how true confidence appears, and how staying calm while carefully dismantling your critic can be the most devastating response of all. Buckle up, because what you're about to see isn't just a clash. It's a reminder that the person speaking slowly might just be giving you time to catch a hand, that underestimating them is often the last mistake you make before they show exactly how wrong you were. The View studio carried its usual energy as Senator John Kennedy was introduced. The audience applauded politely but without much enthusiasm. He wasn't a celebrity or a face. Every viewer recognized just another politician there to discuss the latest political issue. Joy Behar smiled as she introduced him, but it wasn't a welcoming smile. It was the smile of someone who had already decided how the interview would unfold, who had prepared her jokes and jabs, who approached the moment not as a conversation but as entertainment at her guest's expense. Our next guest, she began in a tone signaling what was coming, is a man who mistakes headlines for heroism. The audience laughed on cue, but attention settled in the kind that hints things might go sideways. Please welcome Senator John Kennedy, Joy said that. And Kennedy walked onto the set slowly, not sluggish, but deliberate. Every movement was measured, intentional. The kind of pacing that made some people assume he was slow when he was really just careful. He nodded once to the audience, once to the panel, then took his seat beside Joy without rushing and without the nervous energy most politicians bring to television. He didn't flash a wide smile or try to win the room immediately. The quiet confidence in his eyes spoke louder than any performance. Joy crossed one leg over the other, papers in end, leaning forward just enough to appear casual while still maintaining that edge of aggression, barely disguised as curiosity. "So, Senator," she began, her tone syrup-sweet with sharpness underneath, "do you believe your humor hides a lack of depth?" The question struck like a slap. It didn't address his positions or his work, it went straight for his intelligence, implying that his folksy manner covered shallow thinking. The audience murmured, part amused at the boldness, part tense at the hostility. Kennedy didn't blink. He didn't shift. He didn't show even a hint that the insult had landed. When he finally spoke, his southern drawl wrapped around each word like velvet over steel. "If depth means drowning in nonsense," he said calmly, "I'll stay shallow. Thank you." The laughter that followed wasn't polite or restrained. It was real and immediate, the sound of an audience realizing they'd just seen a flawless counterpunch delivered with such composure that it hit even harder. Joy's smile faltered for a split second before she forced it back. She clearly hadn't expected such a quick, effective response. She'd thrown her opening jab hoping to shake him, and instead he'd turned it into commentary on the absurdity of the question itself. She tried to recover, glancing at her notes, but Kennedy's calm silence filled the room more powerfully than any retort. His complete composure, his refusal to rush or react, was unsettling in its steadiness. Joy chuckled tightly, eyes narrowing just slightly as she recalibrated. "You've got an answer for everything, don't you?" she said, adding with forced sweetness, "I guess that works better when no one's fact-checking." The implication was obvious. His clever comebacks wouldn't hold up under scrutiny, and his wit was covering for weakness. It was the kind of jab meant to provoke defensiveness or anger. Kennedy leaned back a little, the picture of ease, utterly unbothered. "Oh, I'm sure they will," he answered with the same measured calm. "The trick is saying something true enough to survive the check." The audience reacted immediately. Some clapping, others simply watching with rising fascination. Something different was happening. This wasn't the usual dynamic. Kennedy wasn't defensive or combative. He was answering each attack with steady certainty. Joy looked toward the camera, widening her smile, clearly trying to hide the frustration building behind it. "Well," she said with forced brightness, "this is going to be fun." Kennedy's reply was low, but razor-sharp, delivered with that same unshakable composure. "That depends, ma'am. Are we talking fun for the truth? Or for the ratings?" This time, the laughter wasn't hers to guide. It burst from the audience, an instinctive response to the fact that Kennedy had just named exactly what was happening and refused to play the game on her terms. A spark had been lit, and everyone in the studio could feel that the interview was drifting far from the script Joy had planned. Joy leaned forward, her patience visibly thinning. The polite smile from earlier had hardened into something sharper, more openly hostile. "You mock colleagues. You turn pain into punchlines," she accused, her voice clipped, each word delivered like a jab. "Is that leadership, or just laziness, dressed up as charm?" The studio fell, noticeably quieter. The kind of silence where every small sound grows louder. A piece of jewelry clinking, papers shifting, the distant hum of equipment. Joy had escalated from mockery to direct accusation, suggesting Kennedy's entire approach to politics was unserious. Kennedy looked at her without irritation, without defensiveness, with the same steady calm as if he'd seen this exact attack from miles away and prepared not with anger, but with clarity. He took a slow breath, leaned toward the microphone deliberately, and said evenly, "If truth hurts, maybe it's not my joke that's cruel. Maybe it's your comfort that's fragile." The words landed like a silk-wrapped slap, gentle in tone, devastating in effect. The audience reacted before Joy could respond, half gasping at the boldness, half applauding the precision of Kennedy's counterattack. Even one of the co-hosts shifted awkwardly, clearly trying not to smile at how neatly Kennedy had turned Joy's accusation into a reflection of her own defensiveness. Joy blinked hard, her jaw tightening as she absorbed being outmaneuvered yet again. "Oh, that's cute," she said quickly, forcing a laugh that never reached her eyes. "You practice that one in the mirror?" The question was meant to diminish him, to imply that his responses were rehearsed rather than genuine. But Kennedy's reply shifted the entire tone of the interview. He tilted his head slightly, a faint, knowing smile appearing not smug. A steady, "No, ma'am," he said with the same measured calm. "You invited me for a circus. Sorry if I brought a mirror instead." The crowd erupted. Some laughed, some cheered, a few booed in support of Joy, but every eye stayed glued to the stage. Everyone recognized they were watching something unusual. A political guest, not just withstanding Joy's attacks, but taking them apart, piece by piece, with calm precision. Joy froze for a brief moment, the kind of pause you can't rehearse or disguise. The shock of someone realizing they've lost control of a situation they've fully expected to dominate. The camera caught it all. The flash of frustration, the tightening around her mouth, the flicker in her eyes as it hit her, that Kennedy had taken the room from her. 3 seconds of silence stretched into something far longer, tension thick as everyone waited to see how she would recover from being so thoroughly outplayed on her own show. Kennedy didn't gloat. He didn't push further. He simply sat back, with his hands folded, composed and steady. The control room was likely in chaos, but in the studio only one thing mattered. The balance of power had shifted. Joy Behar, known for her quick comebacks and sharp wit, had just been outplayed on live television by someone she had clearly underestimated, and the audience knew it. Joy straightened in her chair, trying to regain control, her voice sharpening as she dropped any pretense of politeness. "So now you're the savior of truth," she said with open sarcasm, shaking her head with a mocking smile. "Please, you twist words better than most twist lies." The audience let out a collective "you," bracing for Kennedy's response to the more direct accusation. He didn't flinch. He didn't shift. He met her gaze steadily, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly to calm. Too confident, the expression of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. "Funny," he said, his voice smooth but cold enough to cut through the tension. "I thought twisting words was the network's job." The studio erupted into gasps and laughter, the startled reaction people have when they witness something truly unexpected. Even Whoopi glanced up from her cards, eyebrows raised, as if unsure whether to intervene or let the moment keep unraveling. Joy blinked rapidly, thrown off balance by the boldness of calling out the network on its own show. She forced a tight chuckle, clearly scrambling. She leaned closer, lowering her voice, but sharpening it like a blade. "This isn't your Senate hearing, Senator," she snapped, trying to regain authority. "You can't filibuster your way out of facts." Kennedy leaned forward too, not aggressively, not matching her hostility, but with the steadiness of someone unmoved. "No need to," he said, his voice quiet but heavy enough to silence the room. "Facts have a habit of standing while opinions like yours fall over in applause." The audience reacted instantly. Some clapped, others gasped, and a few sat frozen, unsure whether they were watching political debate or a calm, surgical dismantling. Joy's smirk disappeared completely. She opened her mouth to fire back something clearly ready, Beth, towards, stalled between anger and disbelief that this was happening on her own stage, in front of her audience. Kennedy didn't add anything. He didn't gloat or press the advantage. He simply leaned back again, hands folded, eyes steady, letting the silence finish what his words had already secured. The crowd felt it. This wasn't just a guest answering hostile questions anymore. This was someone dismantling his interrogator one calm sentence at a time with such measured precision that even Joy seemed to realize she had miscalculated. Joy's smile had completely disappeared. What she had intended as playful banter with an edge had turned into a real confrontation, and she was visibly losing it. Her voice sharpened, frustration bleeding into every syllable as she abandoned strategy and leaned fully into hostility. "You talk slow because you think it sounds wise," she snapped, her hands gesturing with open irritation. "It doesn't. It sounds old." The crowd murmured uneasily. Some laughed nervously. Others exchanged glances. The shift was obvious. Joy had crossed from political critique into personal insult, attacking his manner of speaking as if it reflected diminished capability. Kennedy didn't move for several seconds. He simply looked at her with that same steady calm, as if waiting for the echo of her words to fade, letting them hang long enough that everyone could fully register what she had just said. Then he leaned in toward the microphone, his voice dropping low but remaining firm, his southern drawl carrying the quiet authority of every courtroom he'd commanded. Every debate he'd won through precision instead of volume. "Down where I come from, ma'am," he said slowly, each word landing like a velvet-trapped hammer. "We talk slow, so lies don't slip out. You might try it sometime." The audience erupted. Applause, whistles, cheers rolling through the studio like thunder. It was the sound of people witnessing the perfect counterpunch, delivered with such controlled calm that it couldn't be dismissed as angrily as sharply focused truth. Joy's face flushed red. She forced a tight smile, but the tension around her eyes exposed her distress. The camera caught everything, the kind of reaction no amount of media training could hide. Sari tried to intervene, her voice uncertain. "All right, let's keep things civil, folks." But Kennedy wasn't finished. His tone stayed calm, almost gently, but the words hit with more force than any shout. "I didn't come here to sound smart," he said, shifting his gaze from Joy to the camera, now speaking directly to the viewers at home. "I came here to sound real. But I guess that's offensive in a world addicted to pretending." The applause came again, louder than before. Longer it had the feel of an audience shifting sides, people who arrived expecting to see Joy dismantle a politician. Now, watching that politician dismantle her entire approach, Joy's composure cracked further. The studio lights seemed harsher, the air thicker. Kennedy didn't gloat or perform victory. He simply sat back, letting his words linger. Joy Behar, usually the one in control, suddenly looked like the person being interrogated rather than the one conducting the interview. She felt it slipping away completely now. Each comeback had backfired. Each smirk had become a grimace. Every attempt to diminish Kennedy had only diminished her. She straightened her back, mustering whatever fight she had left. "You think being blunt makes you brave?" she said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the charged room. "It just makes you reckless." The audience stirred, everyone sensing she was swinging her last real punch. Kennedy didn't answer immediately. He adjusted his posture, sitting taller, then fixed his eyes on the main camera instead of Joy. "Reckless," he said evenly, letting the word sit in the air, "is pretending you're brave behind a cue card. I speak without one." The crowd erupted yet again. Whistles, sustained applause, shouts of "that's it" rippled through the studio. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows, half covering what looked like a reluctant grin. Joy blinked, stunned, then forced one more attempt to regain control. "You're just performing honesty," she shot back, her voice tight, almost desperate for authority she no longer had. The room quieted just enough for Kennedy's answer to land cleanly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his expression. He just spoke softly, with absolute certainty. "No, ma'am," he said. "I'm just not afraid to sound wrong in a world obsessed with sounding right." The silence that followed was overwhelming, the kind that makes an entire room forget to breathe. His words were simple, but so pointed that they stopped every other thought. In the space, Joy's lips parted as she searched for a response, but nothing came. There was nothing she could say that would blunt what he had just expressed. That authenticity holds more value than performing correctness. That being genuine outweighs sounding clever. And that courage sometimes means accepting you might be wrong rather than pretending you're always right. Kennedy held her gaze for one more steady beat before turning back toward the audience, his expression unreadable but his presence dominating the room. It wasn't just a comeback. It was checkmate, and everyone sensed it. Joy sat frozen. The tension in the studio felt so thick the air itself seemed to stop moving. The audience was reacting on its own, now no applause cues needed. No prompting, just honest reaction to something unprecedented. Her trademark TV smile twitched at the corners. The practiced expression that had carried her through thousands of interviews now looked brittle, almost painful to maintain, like a mask that no longer fit. The cue cards in her hands shook slightly, her fingers pressing into them hard enough to crease the paper. She drew in a breath and tried to speak, opening her mouth with clear intention, but no sound followed. It wasn't that she lacked words. It was that none of them would be strong enough now. Nothing she could say would recover what had already slipped away. Kennedy didn't move immediately. He didn't need to. The silence itself was doing the work for him, reinforcing every point he'd already made without requiring another sentence. When he finally leaned forward, his voice returned to that calm, measured tone that had quietly turned Joy's own jabs against her. "You called me a joke," he said, his drawl slow and deliberate, giving each word room to land. But a joke's only funny until it tells the truth. The lines sliced through the room like glass. Simple, devastating. U-N-A-R-G. U-A-B-L-E. Dot gasps. Came first, then a rising wave of applause as the audience stood, clapping, cheering, even shouting, the kind of raw reaction no camera can fully contain. Someone in the back yelled, "Say it again," and the laughter that followed hit like a THENDERCLAP. Lap, still holding a smile that her eyes completely contradicted. Behind the expression was someone cornered, someone shaken in a way she had likely never experienced on live television. Kennedy waited patiently for the noise to settle. He didn't try to stretch the moment or soak in applause. He simply turned his head back toward Joy, steady and unflinching, his expression almost gentle despite the force of his words. "In this room, Miss Behar," he said quietly but clearly, "I didn't outtalk you. You just ran out of things to believe." The entire studio went still. A sound technician seemed to forget to breathe. Even the control room, normally a swirl of voices and commands, fell silent as producers stared at their monitors, realizing they were witnessing television history unfold in real time. The camera zoomed in on Joy's face just as her smile finally faded completely. Her jaw tightened, her eyes glistened slightly under the light's knot. Quite tears, but close enough to show the strain of someone clinging to composure while crumbling inside. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Kennedy's expression remained steady, grounded, someone prepared to argue with truth instead of volume, with substance instead of performance. Joy's hands trembled as she set her cards down, her gaze dropping before she forced it back up. But when her eyes met his again, the authority she normally projected was gone. The audience, still standing, began chanting softly at first, then louder. "Kennedy, Kennedy, Kennedy." The chant grew into something raw and electric, genuine, not manufactured. The red studio light blinked, signaling the end of the segment, but no one in the control room cut away. The moment was too significant to interrupt. Kennedy broke the long silence with a quiet breath, leaning forward one last time. "The thing about truth, ma'am," he said softly, just loud enough for the microphone, "is that it doesn't need applause. It just needs the courage to be said." He leaned back, slowly, folding his hands on the table with absolute finality. The crowd erupted again, no longer just clapping, but standing, shouting, some even raising their phones to capture the moment. It was the kind of spontaneous reaction that only happens when people witness something real in a world full of performance. Joy remained seated, her expression frozen in a strange blend of disbelief and forced poise. Her mind was clearly racing, searching for any escape route, any reply that might salvage something from the complete dismantling she had just experienced. But the moment had already decided its outcome, and everyone in the room knew it. The cameras captured it all with unforgiving clarity. Kennedy, calm and composed under the studio lights. Joy, silent and shaken in her own spotlight. This wasn't just a debate. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was a televised Rakinia reminder that quiet confidence outlasts aggressive performance, that deliberate thought outpowers rapid comebacks, and that real authority doesn't need theatrics. It simply exists, revealing itself only when necessary. When the director finally whispered, "Cut," the word felt almost irrelevant. The moment had already carved itself into memories, something destined to be replayed, analyzed, and remembered long after the cameras stopped. Senator John Kennedy had walked into a trap built for him, but instead of being caught, he calmly dismantled every part of it. Never, raising his voice above that steady drawl, never losing his composure, never sinking to the hostility aimed at him. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that sometimes the slowest speaker in the room is simply giving everyone else time to catch up.